How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Mother SpongeBob 1000, and in this video we're going to focus on the remnants of Hurricane Agatha, which made landfall as Category 2 right around southern Mexico, and determine if this does have a possibility of potentially developing into Hurricane Alex as it heads into the Atlantic, and what likely will become Tropical Storm Alex right around the Gulf of Mexico, and see what type of impacts you should expect around the southeastern portion of the United States. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the 5-day tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. And we do see that the remnants of Agatha, which made landfall as Category 2, is hovering right over southern Mexico at this time. And now we do see that we're likely to see at least some sort of tropical cyclone formation in the Gulf of Mexico within the next 5 days. Within the next 48 hours, the chance is lower at around 30% due to obvious reasons such as the land interaction it's dealing with right now over the Yucatan Peninsula. However, you see that beyond the 48-hour mark, the chance greatly increases to 70%. So more likely than not, we will see at least some sort of tropical depression or tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico within the next 5 days, and we'll likely see this impact the United States and make landfall, whether there's a tropical depression, tropical storm, or maybe just typical tropical low pressure system that doesn't really develop into a tropical cyclone. But it seems very likely at this point we will at least see some sort of impacts from this, what likely will become Tropical Storm Alex, within the next 5 days, more specifically right around Florida. Now, if I were to show you guys how the remnants of Agatha looks at this point, which will eventually evolve into Tropical Storm Alex, most likely in the Gulf of Mexico, we do see that it's very disorganized. Of course, this isn't anything unusual when we do see a tropical cyclone meander over land for such a prolonged period of time, and that's exactly what's happening right now, where this low pressure system has been over Mexico for quite a while now, for over 12 hours. So of course we're bound to see a lot less convection around center circulation, and of course the low pressure system will eventually lose a lot of its moisture as since it's pretty much disconnected from the warmer Gulf of Mexico waters or the warmer Eastern Pacific waters. So as a result, the center circulation is completely dry at this point, with most of the convection occurring well outside of center circulation, pretty much associated with an upper level low that's located just to the north of this storm, right around the northern Gulf of Mexico. And based on where the clouds are drifting, you probably will assume that the wind shear is quite high over this region, over the Yucatan Peninsula. And you're correct about that, because look at how fast the clouds are drifting towards the east, where we do see strong westerly winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere, pretty much dominating Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula, which isn't, again, not anything unusual for the month of May, where there's still a strong amount of wind shear throughout the Atlantic for the most part. It's not until August and September we really do see the wind shear subside right around the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic. But unfortunately, it seems like this wind shear won't last in the future, because if we were to look further southward, you see that the wind direction changes from more of a westerly direction to more of a northerly direction, which shows that there's a little bit of an upper level high located in this region where the wind shear is a little bit lighter, and that upper level high is expected to move northward to where this trough that you can't really tell on the water vapor imagery that's located right around the southern Gulf of Mexico will enter a lightly sheared environment, which will allow it to most likely strengthen as it approaches Florida within the next 5 days. So just because wind shear is strong right now does not mean that will continue. If we were, again, to take a look at how strong the wind shear is, we're seeing upper level winds equivalent to 40 to 50 knots, which is quite strong over the Caribbean. But look just to the south of where the low pressure system is located, very light wind shear as a result of the existence of an upper level high that's pretty much diverging a lot of the air molecules aloft away from the center, and that's expected to move northward, and the wind shear will subside right around the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. So that's going to be something to keep in mind, that because that will be when the this low pressure system will strengthen as it heads towards the Gulf of Mexico once we see that upper level high move northward, and of course the low pressure system move into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. So we're just waiting on those two factors before we could see gradual development of this low pressure system. So if we were to also take a look at the sea surf temperatures, and what I'm noticing that sea surf temperatures now have been rapidly rising throughout the Gulf of Mexico, because even a couple days ago we didn't see readings up to 29 to 28 degrees Celsius in the Gulf of Mexico, but that's quickly changing. We're quickly approaching the summer months, so as a result, the sea surf temperatures are quickly warming up throughout the Atlantic, and now these sea surf temperatures are more than warm enough to support for tropical cyclone development, especially thanks to this warm patch that's located just to the northwest of Cuba, where we do see sea surf temperatures right around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius. So that would definitely enhance the amount of convection around center circulation as it moves northeastward, and we're gonna see the center circulation structure itself a lot faster as a result of warmer than average sea surf temperatures located in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's something to keep in mind. Sea surf temperatures won't be really an issue with this low pressure system as it moves northeastward. Maybe if it moves very far northeastward, if it even stays alive this far, which is certainly a possibility, but we just need to wait and see how this storm structures itself first within the next couple of days as it approaches Florida. Now, let's now take a look at what the computer models are saying. So first, let's take a look at the GFS model. Of course, right now there isn't much going on right around the Yucatan Peninsula when it comes to tropical cyclone formation, just mainly scattered showers throughout the Yucatan Peninsula, but eventually we will see that low move just to the east of the Yucatan Peninsula, and we'll see a multitude of lows pretty much competing for energy. But there's the current consensus is that all this energy will converge just to the east of the Yucatan Peninsula, just off the coast of Cancun, and this is when we should see our first formable low pressure system form just off the Yucatan Peninsula. It might not necessarily be classified as a tropical depression or storm just yet, but we should begin to see its origins of development just off the Yucatan Peninsula right around the 42-hour mark. So I'd say right around 24 to 48 hours from now, we will see more convection occur just off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, which likely will become Tropical Storm Alex. And if we were to compare it to the European model at the same time frame, the European model is a little bit slower, but we still do see convection occurring right around the Yucatan Peninsula 2 days from now. So if I were to continue to move forward with the European model, 72 hours, you see that now we really do see a formable low pressure system just off the Yucatan Peninsula. But what's very interesting is that you see that the storm is very lopsided when it comes to moisture, because we do see majority of the rain showers are occurring just to the east of this low pressure system, while towards the west it's a lot drier, and that could be one of the hindering factors with the storm as it moves further northeastward, is the amount of dry air that could entrain the storm on the western side, because we do see that right around the 3-day mark on Friday, June 3rd, we do see quite a bit of dry air located right around the western portion of the Gulf of Mexico. And while not a lot of it is entraining the storm, we do see just a bit of dry air located right around the southern portion of this storm. And dry air, of course, would weaken this storm because the air is a lot more stable. We see the air molecules not really rise up and lower the pressure along the surface, so as a result that decreases the wind speed, and that decreases the amount of latent heat that moves aloft in the atmosphere, and we sort of see a temperature inversion where the air isn't warm enough to support for convection and intensification overall. So the dry air is definitely something we're this storm will need to contend with. However, the European model is still expecting this storm to fight through this dry air, as it doesn't expect enough dry air to entrain the storm. So as a result, the European model still wants to develop this into a tropical storm. And if we were to continue to move even forward, you see that dry air becomes a little bit more of an issue as it moves northeastward, where we do see the moisture quickly dissolve along the western side of the storm. Now, that would be one of the hindering factors. However, despite the amount of dry air we're seeing right around Florida, as this low pressure system continues to approach Florida, we do see that this storm still manages to strengthen, and I think this is due to a variety of factors, mainly due to baroclinic influences as it moves further northeastward. However, we also need to keep in mind that the European model has a bias of shedding low pressure systems a little bit too fast as they move up the east coast, so we definitely need to take that into consideration. But it could be that possibility where, despite the dry air, we could see the storm strengthen, because while the wind shear will be relatively strong just off the southeast coast, we're gonna see the wind shear, we're gonna see the upper level winds sort of coincide with how the surface winds will move. So as a result, the storm could still very well strengthen, since the surface level winds and the upper level winds are going the same direction, which would enhance the wind speed of the storm. And of course, we could see a little bit of baroclinic instability, which would make the storm somewhat subtropical, and it would make sense because in this area, the entire area isn't necessarily experiencing sea surface temperatures over the 80 degree threshold. So we could see this sort of evolve into a subtropical cyclone once it passes through Florida, but we need to wait and see, because the GFS model isn't necessarily agreeing with with taking this storm that far up northeast, and let alone strengthening it that far. Because if we were to take a look at the GFS model wants to take it a lot further southward, and it expects a lot of dry air to pretty much entrain this storm. While we do still see a low pressure system, it's a lot weaker than what the European model wants to take, and a lot further eastward, which would definitely be a much better scenario, because not only do we have a weaker storm, but it is well far from the Carolinas. So that's definitely something to celebrate about, if the GFS model were correct. But there's still a lot of uncertainty regarding that forecast. But yeah, the dry air is going to be a hindering factor, but both computer models are expecting that, at least early on, the dry air won't really affect the strengthening process of this storm, as there's just going to be just enough moisture to where it could hold its own. And I think the reason why the computer models think this is not only due to the fact that the sea surface temperatures are more than warm enough to support for tropical cyclone development, but also the wind shear won't necessarily be extremely strong as it moves northeastward. Because if I were to move forward, you see that while there is, I'd say, light to maybe moderate wind shear just to the north of this low pressure system, the thing is that the low pressure, or what would likely become Tropical Storm Alex at this time, is moving the same direction as the upper level winds, and the surface level winds are moving the same direction as well. So this wind shear isn't necessarily affecting it much, because both the lower level winds and the upper level winds are pretty much moving the same direction. So as a result, that does promote the more strengthening of this storm, and that does lighten the wind shear down a little bit, because of course wind shear is a change in wind direction with height, and since the wind directions are mainly going to be around the same direction with height, then that means that the wind shear will be a lot lighter, and strengthening is more likely as this moves northeastward. And same could be said with the European model. We do see that upper level high that's going to move just north enough to where the wind shear will be relatively light, and this will strengthen as it moves northeastward. But again, there's still uncertainty, because of course there could be that possibility that maybe this upper level high doesn't move as far north as anticipated, which would make which would make tropical cyclone development a little bit more hostile, because then the wind shear would dominate the Gulf of Mexico a little bit more, not really allowing this storm to structure itself and to attain structured center of circulation to where more convection could occur. That's certainly a possibility. But with both of the primary computer models agreeing that the wind shear won't be enough of a factor to weaken this storm and potentially make landfall as a tropical storm right around Florida, shows that there is definitely more confidence that we will see a tropical storm or tropical depression at the very least make landfall along Florida. So that's something to pay attention to. Now, in terms of steering currents, now that's another factor we're going to need to pay close attention to, because what's interesting is that the European model wants to take a track further northward, where in this scenario, not only would central Florida and northern Florida would be more at risk, but the entirety of the southeast United States coast would be more at risk, because of course the low pressure at that point would be hugging the coast, and it could reach a strength strong enough to where it could maybe cause some havoc along the coast with maybe gusty winds and potentially coastal flooding in the more vulnerable areas. So that's something to keep in mind along the southeast coast. While the and when we take a look at the steering currents comparing the two computer models, the reason why the European model is expecting a track a little bit further northward than the GFS model is because it expects a bit more ridging to be located right around the Caribbean. And while if we were to take a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly for the entirety of the northern Atlantic, and while we don't really see height anomalies above average right around the Caribbean and the main development region, if we were to take a look at the 588 contour line, which represents the millibar pressure at which or the height at which the millibar pressure is at 500 millibars, we do see that there is a small ridge located right around the main development region and the Caribbean, which is just enough to steer the storm further northward and closer along the southeast coast, closer to Carolinas. While if we were to compare it to the GFS model, you see that the ridge is almost non-existent, where we do see that small area where the pressure, or at least the height at which the millibar pressure is at 500 millibars is at 588 feet, which show or at least around 588 meters above. So we do see that the ridge is a little bit weaker in the GFS model, which is the reason why the GFS model is taking a further southward track. So to determine really if this storm, how far north or south this storm will move, we're really going to need to pay close attention to how this ridge builds right around the main development region and the Caribbean to really see how far north or south this moves. It also really depends on how much of weakness there is in ridging, because if there's a bigger weakness in ridging earlier, then this storm would more likely move faster to the north, which wouldn't allow this ridge to build, and this would take it further southward. So we definitely need to pay a close attention to a lot of these factors, but most importantly, we need to pay attention to this ridge to really determine where exactly this will go. Will this take a more south and eastward track, which I think would be the better case scenario for most people, because this would only affect southern Florida and not really those further northward? Or will we see a track further northward where not only would this affect the Carolinas and Georgia, but we could see a more significant storm if this were to move further northward? So a lot of questions, but I'll make sure to keep you guys updated as the forecast changes over the next several days. Still a lot to determine, but what I could say is that most likely the Florida will experience tropical storm conditions, and I think heavy rain and flooding will be the biggest issue. And maybe if this storm becomes strong enough, we could maybe see some coastal flooding. That's not out of the question either. So it's definitely something to be at this point high alert throughout Florida, especially if you live in a flood prone area, because we definitely the chance of heavy rain is definitely high for this weekend, whether this develops into tropical depression, tropical storm, or even a hurricane, or nothing at all. So definitely keep this in mind along Florida, and we're definitely gonna need to pay close attention to how much dry air there is and the wind shear and the amount of ridging that will build to really determine the track and the strength of this storm as it approaches that area. Now, taking a look at the current computer models, we do see that the with that most of the computer models are taking this towards southern Florida. And if we were to take a look at the model intensity guidance, you do see that for a long period of time, it doesn't really want to develop this into a tropical storm. But I wouldn't necessarily take this information. I'd definitely take this information with a grain of salt, because the model intensity guidance is known to underestimate the actual wind speed of tropical cyclones. So take this with a grain of salt, and this run isn't necessarily extremely updated. So I think more likely than not, we will see a tropical storm develop despite what the model intensity guidance is saying. And the threat that I'm extremely worried about for Florida is a heavy rain threat associated with Tropical Storm Alex. Well, likely will become Tropical Storm Alex. We could see up to 10 inches of rain along the extreme southern portion of Florida within the next 5 days, which is extremely worrying. This includes Miami, this includes Key West, this includes areas further northward into West Palm Beach and potentially up to Port St. Lucie as well. You need to pay close attention. And we could even see some heavy rain closer to Tampa and Fort Myers, where we, especially if this were to take the more northward track. So definitely something to keep in mind throughout the southern coast of Florida, as flooding is likely this weekend. Now, taking a look at my forecast when it comes to track and strength forecast. Keep in mind, this is just my speculation. To seek official guidance, consult the National Hurricane Center, but this is my speculation on what I expect to happen when it comes to strength and the exact track. So I expect a slow strengthening process over the next 2 days, 25 to 30 miles per hour. Of course, a lot of land interaction is going to be the issue, and it's going to take some time for the center of circulation to structure itself. But you see that Friday into Saturday, I'm expecting this to develop into a tropical storm, as it seems like the sea surface temperatures will be warm enough, while the wind and the wind shear for the most part will be light enough, and the upper level winds and less surface level winds will move the same direction, so strengthening is more likely. And so definitely keep this in mind for the southern coast of Florida. I'm expecting a 60-mile-per-hour storm to potentially make landfall along southern Florida, but keep in mind that this is just my speculation. So, to seek official guidance, consult the National Hurricane Center, like I said, but make sure to pay close attention to this in Florida, as Tropical Storm Alex is likely for this weekend. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys have a great day.